Live.
So we are just waiting for a few more attendees. Just welcome everybody to this wonderful webinar. Just waiting for everyone to get on board. So Hemant, do you think we should start up?
Yeah, I think we should start. People will join in as they come.
Yeah, I think we should start. Let's just be punctual.
All right, waiting to touch 30 participants. Okay, so let's start. So those of you who've joined us, wonderful to have you on this forum. I'm sure a lot of you will join us as we, get deeper into discussion. Today's discussion is all about materials and materiality. Often something we don't speak about, but something that's so important to the life of an architect. I think, we'd like to just introduce you. This particular webinar is hosted by an initiative called the Boxx, which was really born during the COVID time when we were all locked down in our offices. And a few of us thought that why do we need offices? And we then wondered, that the only reason we need offices is because we, as a profession, are very attached and connected to materials and to samples, and we need to be around our place of doom, so to say, with all the materials falling all over us. So the whole idea was that can we digitize and put materials onto a portal of the sort that is hosting this particular webinar, and can we really make it convenient to work from anywhere hereafter and be able to access materials at any address hereafter, with the kind of ease that the tech sector works with. So that was the whole idea, and I just introduce you to everyone. First of all, thank you to all the panelists who are here. Very good friends, all of you. Request all of you to switch on your cameras so that everybody can see you. So we have Swanzil. Thank you for being there. And you've been doing some great work in the residential segment, particularly. I'm sure a lot of other segments. Abhigyan, welcome to have you here. It's wonderful to have seen some of your work over the years, and especially in the F&B segment and the hospitality segment. So great to have you there. Prashant, great to have you here. You've had a long journey of being in the workspace segment. Do switch on your camera as soon as you can to be able to see you. And of course, Nilanjan, you've been doing it all. You are the elder brother of the pack, and wonderful to have you. So Nilanjan does everything, all that we mentioned, and more perhaps. Yeah, I think we'll throw in conservation as well. And of course, I can't forget, the wonderful omnipresent presence of Hemant Sood, chairman of IIID, IIID Delhi chapter. Good to have you, Hemant. And your chief role is to, be the disruptor in chief. Try and bring questions that make everything more fun and more informative for everybody. So I think with that, we just like you to introduce yourselves a little bit more and talk to us about how important are materials, to you in your life as architects. So start with Swanzel.
Thanks, Vistas. And delighted to be here. And when you mentioned this idea of the story box and the idea of materials, it's something that I feel very, very passionate about because, as I think we all realize that materials are really what help us create the spaces and the stories and the narratives that we actually construct through our architecture and our interior design. And personally, for me, I think in many ways, materials always bring out the child in me. Like whenever I see a new material or something that I haven't seen before, it's sometimes really exciting to kind of see slate veneers, for example, when they first came out, and they were spectacular. I think these days you see so much innovation actually in veneers, in terms of surface texturing and the kind of dyeing and staining, and it's actually incredible. And I think that one of the things as a creative person that I always seek to be is to be inspired. And I think for me, materials are a great source of inspiration. And I think that one of the things that I hope to be able to do is perhaps and see more, I think, in the industry is architects collaborating with scientists, with engineers, and with uh, building material centers to innovate on materials, to actually create new materials. I really see that as the future, and I think that is the direction that I would be. And secondly, the whole idea of upcycling waste and creating incredibly beautiful products and materials out of upcycled waste. So these are the two things that I'm really excited about to see in the future and hopefully very soon. And delighted to be here. Thanks.
Sure, great, Swanzel. I was just worried you may have answered every question that we had put out in the list for the evening. But thank you. Abhigyan, like to, sort of bring you in to say a few lines about yourself. What's your journey been like and how important are materials in your way of thinking?
Hi, so we've been practicing for quite some time. It's been about 10 years. And of late, our journey has been focusing majorly on F&B sector. So very clearly, we start with a kind of a underlying idea or a storyline. And then we get down into the depth of research that what is it that helps us express ourselves the best. At times, we need to invent material. For example, we took shredded plastic and put it in terrazzo, and we wanted to build a project out of recycled plastic. So that's something in which we started inventing materials. And at times we need to research and go back to traditional crafts and materials. So we built a bar in US where we did chatai form of beaten metal, and we created kind of a beaten metal texture where we thought that there is so much already being done and built, and it's how you put it together becomes a new story. So there must be a zillion materials that we still haven't yet started or explored, or in various genres. So you go to an industrial product and you explore ceramic kind of transformers and see how you can use them in some way or the other. The idea is to identify what suits your story, and then how you put it together also makes a huge difference. So it's not just using a material. The material should communicate what you want to communicate, and yet I feel that it gives an opportunity to explore multiple things. I mean, we are in the zone of vernacular grunge, where we've seen a lot of products which has not yet been used or which was being used and vanished. So we love to get them back and get them back on your face. So there are interesting products that we have stopped using and we get them back.
That's superb, Abhigyan. We'd love to have you on our board of directors. I mean, the kind of materials that you're talking of is really wonderful. Just for a lot of you, question answers are open on the Q&A section. You could actually write on that. We'll take up the questions in the last 10-15 minutes. So do throw all your bouncers and googlies at us. We have good batsmen who play off the front foot, right? So also the sessions being, streamed also on Facebook. So, for those of you who find that more convenient. Okay, going ahead, Nilanjan, good to, understand from you, your perspective on materials and this whole discussion we're having this evening.
Thanks, Vistap, and glad to be here with good old friends. Talking about materials, I'd like to take the thing back a little historically to put the discussion in a different perspective. I feel this material culture has been very intrinsic in the entire human development, evolution of human beings. If you see the anthropological references, uh, material culture was a very important part of our lives. A lot of events were depicted with different materials, materials which were used in a different, almost transcended the material as a word and became a piece of art. Even if you see the Aboriginal tribes which are still there, how they explored the different materials with ropes or even wood and stone, the carvings, uh, to represent different maybe clan insignias, sometimes representing different moods, sometimes different festivals, events. So I think they were really exploring materials to its fullest extent, which somehow maybe we have lost over time. Coming to my own practice, I feel that materials like, Abhigyan pointed out, it tells a story. When we start with design, we try to see how we can depict that whole narrative about the design with different materials, how the contrasting rough stone can be merged with glossy steel, or maybe smooth glass against a textured stone. And what's very important for me is that how the interface of two different materials behave. We always, that's the beauty in detailing. When we express, it's not only using different materials, but we would like to express each material which has its own identity and not really fuse the materials together. I mean, that's very important in design when we merge different materials, bamboo with steel or wood with glass. Each material should stand out and retain its identity with some groove or a line or a depression or level difference. I think that's what we all need to explore and discuss probably in a forum like this. And since you have this platform that you've created, we are looking forward to a lot of interaction with the design fraternity and exploring of different materials and how we can, exchange ideas and explore the whole gamut of materials which are still left
I
out.
totally agree with you. I think, since we started this journey of material, getting into materials, we've really discovered there are a whole lot of materials, that, have not been in our radar conventionally. And I think that's the exciting part of the journey, coming closer to materials. So, Hemant, I'd like to sort of get two lines in from your side in the least. What's your take on the importance of materials to the industry?
Hi, Vispi. Firstly, thanks for calling me. And I have a very different take on this because I think we all talk about how important material is for us as designers. But how much importance do we give material in our practice? How much importance do we give to even the people who make and supply those materials? And I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little controversial today, but why is Triple ID the only organization that even has a trade membership for people who are vendors, manufacturers, dealers, distributors, contractors, people who work with our material, without which our designs are not complete, but we don't seem to give them enough importance. How many of us practicing design welcome vendors to our offices? How many of them allow them to share the new technology and the new materials and the new products that are available today? Very few. If you really look inside your heart, you'll find that the answer is very, very few. We are busy.
Hemant,
I know.
I think more. Just to interrupt, I think more in the COVID time, it's been a little bit of a problem. Yes, we would perhaps not be meeting vendors, but that's exactly what the platform's for. It's really meant to get people together virtually, and to make our work more you could say tech-based virtual rather than just being physical. So can I just take this to the next question to a lot of you? Are we as a profession still a very tactile and a very visual profession, or is it all about space creation? Does anyone of you want to take that? I mean, if you were to really weigh space creation versus materiality, which would be heavier, which would be more important?
So I'd just like to say in response to that, that I think there's no separation. The way I see even ideation of spaces, when you really, at least it's very personal for each practitioner, actually. I think that it's a very personal response. But in speaking for myself, I think that, when one actually visualizes a space, it is kind of integral. You are already thinking of the overall quality and feeling. And for me personally, as an architect, my whole process is very intuitive and experiential rather than external and then fill in the interior. So the space is derived from the experience, and therefore the experience and the materiality are completely seamless and interconnected. So, and especially when one looks at specifically the kind of residential space, and the qualities that a residential space has to embody in order to uh, create a home for people and to create a sense of meaning and grounding for people, material choices are actually completely critical in terms of what are you creating. And personally, as a practice, I think that we really strongly believe in the fact that there are certain values that are also embedded in those material choices. And apart from the more commonly understood aesthetic value, there are many other values in terms of sustainability, in terms of what are the qualities within the space. And I think that these are all things that we need to actually go beyond our intuitive responses as well and try and look at what is the impact of those material choices. And I really want to bring in this idea of sustainability right in, because I think very often now, especially because we actually are existing in an ecosystem, and I use the word ecosystem in the broader sense of the word, that it is really global, right? So we are not limited in any way in the choices that we make. However, the implications of those material choices are there right in front of all of us. So I think we really need to think that through carefully before in whatever work that we do. So I'll stop here, and I think I've gone on a little beyond your question, but
no, Swansel, that's interesting because I'd like to ask other panelists also. There are a few architects who'd like to put the materials first together. I mean, it's more about creating the mood, getting. I don't know if that's the case with you, Abhigyan, but get the right wooden flooring, get the right texture for the wall. After all, it's all about walls, floors, and ceilings if you really break it down. Many times the creative side of an architect gets spurred on by materials first, and then it's about space creation. Let's say space is a given. There's only that much you can do. Let's talk about, let's say, tighter spaces that need better materiality. So do you feel that, that getting hold of materials first allows you a bigger repertoire, of design solutions and usage, for example?
So we are always into this experimental mode where the studio keeps collecting a lot of stuff, and we have almost endless amount of things that we can mix and put together a story. But the choices are very different for different projects. So, for example, I was in a hills few days back, and then we had to cut the hill to create the contours that we wanted. So then, what happens to the stone? And then the decision between build the house with a concrete sourced, or we build it with stone walls with engaging labor and material which is right on the side. So then we took a conscious decision of making sure that we don't build concrete structures. So why not cut the hill, collect the stone, and very beautiful thing. So they said that let's do an auction. Let's call all villagers from around the spaces. So if they can give their stone, we will put a stack and put a cost to it. And that's how the entire construction process is approached. That it creates opportunity for people in the surrounding. It creates them to work as a labor component, And why to build a concrete structure in a hill? It's not required. Just because it's easier and faster, that may not be the best decision. So that becomes a generator of a project. Okay, fine. So define, we let us build the walls out of stone. And now the decision comes whether to expose it and whether to plaster it. That's a later call. But that's how the materiality of the entire project shapes up. So that's one way of looking at things. Another way of looking at things is that we assembled a project in Europe, in US, where we built an Indian restaurant, and we collected almost everything from all around India. So we did tikri glasswork from Jaipur. We created a Sheesh Mahal. We packed it in a box, and we shipped it to US. Their collection of that material was very important because that Indianness will come only once I use a Jaisalmer stone and a real tikri work rather than a wallpaper or a graphic. So for them to experience how we experience spaces is very important to use that right kit of parts to for them to have like a true experience of this is how probably an Indian space. For them, they just know Rajasthan as a reference. So they didn't know that there are multiple ways of doing this. Dokra, there's brass, there's so many new materials that is being used. And India is all about that juxtaposition of multiple things together. So yeah, so then in that storyline, we need to collect a lot of material and put it together for that experience to happen.
So you've talked about, basically honesty in materials. That's what you spoke about in your first half. You talked about, using materials for what they are and not covering them. Now, there's this big debate between honesty in material usage versus decoration. Where do we stand as a panel on this? I mean, expressing the true material that's inherent versus decoration. Is there a right, is there a wrong, or is it a mix? Is it a case-to-case contextual thing? Nilanjan, would you want to take that?
Yeah, I would like to stress that materials are always dictated by the context, also the climate, the available technology, the people, and eventually the kind of setting that you want to create. And when we use a material as a decorative, then the purpose is different. It becomes a craft. Now, talking about design, when we use materials, the choices are defined, like I said, by context, technology. What is more important is how we render that material. Even if a material is very local in a particular region, let's say Kashmir, and we would like to use the local Devri stone, we try to use it in a more contemporary way. Even if we use the local pine wood, gone are the days of those traditional Daje Dewaris or Khatam Band. So the idea is to use craft in a more contemporary way because we now have a more evolved technology. I feel a craft or a decoration gets fossilized if you use a material just the way it has been used for centuries. Yes, in a very contextual way, the example that Abhigyan said was also valid. I'm not negating that. In a place where you want to create an Indianness, you might use a very, very local motif. But I feel it's very important to make the crafts also evolve. Otherwise, they stagnate. Whenever we use materials, it gives us that opportunity as a designer to contemporize it. Yeah, that's my take.
It also, yeah, Sonzil, go ahead.
So, my point of view on this is that I think what always drives selection of material when you're looking at, what is being created is the project intent, right? And I think in most cases, I mean, it was very interesting what Abhigyan just said about sending Indian objects into the physical space of another country, because I think one of the things that I don't know whether all of us realize, but I think we all have a very sensory response to material. We respond physically to material. So if you notice, spaces that have a lot of wood, which is a breathing material, which is a living material, instinctively create a certain mood, a certain fragrance, a certain earthiness and a certain warmth, which is a product of the fact that that is what that material is embodying, right? For example, if you go into a mall or a commercial building where there is a high degree of highly reflective, high energy materials like glass, like vitrified tiles, there's a certain property of I would say almost repelling that, you feel, because it's actually something which is actually not drawing you in. So it has a different energetic quality. So materials actually have a very clear sensory and energetic quality if one is sensitive to this. And I think that so each object establishes a little presence in that space. So when you actually look at this idea of authenticity versus decoration, I think it comes down to eventually the uh, the whole process of selection and the intent. So for example, if you were to look at, let's say, a showroom interior, right? You're creating a story. There are going to be elements that are decorative in terms of their purpose, but they may be authentic in terms of the context. So there are ways that you can bridge this idea of authenticity and decoration through what is selected, right? And the thoughtfulness and mindfulness with which it is selected.
So simply speaking, yeah, it needs to be contextual. It needs to relate to the context, and it needs
doesn't,
to,
yeah. So it doesn't necessarily, they're not necessarily opposites. They're just perceived as opposites, but on the surface. But if you go a little deeper, you can have an authentic material which is also being decorative in terms of how it's expressed. And vice versa. So I think eventually, but as a practice, I would say that, we definitely stand very firmly with the idea of authentic expression, not just for reasons of sustainability and zero maintenance, which is what typically tends to happen when you have a material which is expressed authentically. But it doesn't mean that we shy away from using materials in a different way if the context requires it. So for other projects, for example, corporate interiors, where we've used both craft and materials like fabrics in unusual ways, for paneling and for, so it's just a question of, I think, eventually the tools and the devices that you use as a designer to communicate what you're trying to say and the intent of what you want people to feel when they're within that space. And I think that when that idea is very clear, what you need to do again becomes quite clear.
Great. Swanzil, I now sort of have Prashant say a few things. Prashant, you're back on. So, you've been in the workspace segment for 20 plus years, right? Just wanted to know, how do architects select materials for projects and what are their inspirations? How do you go about it?
You're on mute, Prashant.
His mic is not working, I think so.
Oh God.
I think your mic is not working. Oh, okay.
On
Just
your
try and
phone.
fix that. Okay. Would you like to, anybody would like to take that question, Nilanjan or Abhigyan? How do you select materials for a project? Where do you find inspiration from? Leave aside what's already there. What are the angles that you would, use?
So I mean, take it on. So yeah, so if I may answer that, so very clearly we build a mood board, a storyline, and then we start hunting for specific material that matches that storyline, and we go to the extent of calling developers and asking them to build something new for us. So people who are in the industry, for example, glass, and we ask them, why don't we start fusing glass with fabric, with wireframe, and why don't you show us something? If we have to achieve something, we try and get that material story right by talking to our vendors and making sure that we achieve the right palette of things. So if we have to print a tile, we print a tile. If we print on a spoon, we print on a spoon, just to get it get the material line to be adhering to what we want to do. Yeah, Nilanjan. Sorry.
Yeah. So in my case, it's slightly inspired by nature. Most of the materials, working in the sustainable domain, I tend to use a lot of natural materials, a lot of wood, bamboo, local materials, even bricks, or in whatever form stone is available. And of course, we go into, when we prepare a mood board, it's very important for me to choose even the color of the stone and the finish of the stone, the grain of the wood that I want to go with that kind of the mood that I'm trying to create. It's not only from an interior point of view, but even in architecture, the kind of space, the kind of warmth I want to convey. So the stone may have a a very rough and uncut finish if I want a particular uh, mood in that space. I may go in for a very high gloss polish on stone. And so I think it's very much a depiction of the entire material palette, uh, beyond color or textures or patterns. So we create a 3D view, and along with that, we create a mood board of all the materials which will go into it, even the fabric, the textiles, uh, what would be used in the furniture, what veneer, whether it has an open grain polish or what. So everything is detailed to that extent, because that helps the client visualize also, and it makes us also, understand the space much better, and try to see if we are conveying the right uh, the mood or the association of the feelings, especially in architecture, because that's what we have been discussing materials, whether uh, we have been looking purely from a visual point of view or not in design, right? So it's very important to understand. In my practice, I feel that anything we design should appeal to all the five senses and not just the visual. Like Johanny Palasma says very nicely in his book, The Eyes of the Skin, that when human beings have five senses, why should it be just one that we appeal to? Why should the visual? So it has to be the tactile feel of the material, the auditory, the sense of smell, touch, taste, everything. It should appeal to all our five senses. So that's what
On a,
decides the mood.
on a lighter note, the only thing we smell is VOC and organic compounds in the air after polishing. The paint
Let me
industry
tell
is
you,
fighting that. You know,
the smell, the aroma of natural wood is amazing. The smell of the wet earth is mesmerizing. So it goes beyond. Yeah, it's mostly the artificial materials which will smell.
I just want to add here that, I think that the real problem and the sad thing actually is that, in many ways we have moved so far down this industrial tunnel of brick and cement and steel that people have forgotten what it even feels like to inhabit spaces that actually have this sensory quality. So if you actually spend time in a mud, in a room built out of mud, and I'm talking about from high-end properties to experimental rammed earth blocks, the quality of the air inside is different. You can breathe the air differently. There are minerals in the air. And what you just said about VOCs, it's the reverse. Unlike most contemporary finishes which have which are kind of constantly leaching these VOCs into the air, the reverse is happening when you have natural materials. So the sad thing is that we are, because people have not don't get an opportunity to experience the quality of the interior air when you're in a slightly more not, I wouldn't use the word sustainable, but just in the presence of natural materials, that you don't realize what you're missing. So I think that while we also kind of talk about all of this in terms of decoration, authenticity, I think we must not forget, and at this time I think that is more critical than anything else, which is health. How are these materials affecting our health? And I find it quite baffling that there are clients today who will spend literally crores on an interior and then are not sensitive to air purification. How can you live in a city like Gurgaon or Delhi and want to cut corners with your air purification? I mean, that is the most important thing for you to survive. So I think we as a fraternity have to really start paying very close attention to this, because it is, I think, now a critical time to evaluate issues like dust. Does that material gather dust? Is it easy to clean? Is it definitely carpeting is a no. Fabric paneling, now one would think 20 times about. Even things like curtains, it's something which is quite, I think, I really discourage clients in North India, Delhi, Gurgaon, to have curtains, because blinds are far better in terms of because they roll up, dust doesn't collect, and they're self-maintaining. So there's small things people don't realize. They're just in patterns of seeing things, and they're not realizing the connection between those choices and actually the air that they breathe. And I think that today we're at a point where there is no choice but for every professional to take this very seriously, because whether clients are aware of this or not, it's our responsibility to educate them about it.
So let me toss this upside down now. Hemant, I need you in here. Hemant, now let's say Swansell was talking about a mud wall. Imagine you're doing a hotel and you're proposing this to the vice president of the hotel group that you want a mud wall, and he looks at you with a strange expression that how's maintenance going to happen? So do you think that there are certain solutions for certain industries and certain things that don't work in other verticals and industries?
I just want to step in here for a minute, Vistas, and say that, recently, less than, I think actually 2 months ago, I went to stay at the Lalit Mangar, which is entirely made out of rammed earth. It's a spectacular property.
I understand your point. I just wanted Hemant to bring in another angle. I don't know if he's there, if he's heard the question. But would somebody want to take that? Prashant, are you audible? I think we still have a technical problem there. Nilanjan, what's your say on that?
See, it doesn't matter if you're using rammed earth or whatever.
No, don't take me wrong. I'll just interrupt again. There is something called material, the durability of materials, and their appropriate usage. So that's something I want to talk about.
See, whenever you choose materials or any future materials, there are three factors, that we all look at. One is the availability, the durability, the lifespan, the overall life cycle of the product, because a lot of energy goes into its production, and the economy. That should dictate everything. So even whether you are doing a hotel or a residence or an institutional project or a school, the criteria remains very much the same. Now, of course, in a hospitality project, what you're trying to convey is a certain amount of warmth, a certain amount of luxury, but that can be achieved even with natural materials. It depends how you render it. If you use rammed earth in a very crude and rough textured way, it will have a rustic feel to it. If you want to use it in a luxurious way, we will have to render it in a very smooth way, used some maybe a little bit of wooden beading somewhere, accentuated with some polish. So it is totally up to the designer how he explores every material to its fullest and not really use it how it has been used traditionally. That's our role actually, because all the materials are available around us, and we can even bamboo matting, even cane can be made to look very luxurious. How depending on sculptural, in fact, even with normal wood, you can create fantastic structures. It can become beyond a screen. It can be a piece of art or a sculpture, depending where you place it. So even in a hospitality project, it can be a very high-end project, or in a very high-end residence, you can use traditional materials if that is what your material palette is, but render it in the right way. That's
so
what
I'll just come in with a little anecdote. I mean, we were doing a project for a hotel, and we were wanting to use some good material that was Italian, because that was aspirational for the client, as you can understand. Actually, we were all saying that we're actually, not thinking about, the entire business of using appropriate materials. We're not using, local materials. We're trying to do something that's, not carbon negative, or not carbon neutral, let's say. We're actually paying for a material that has inherent cracks, that is actually weak, that is actually being strengthened. So this whole thing leads you to natural versus artificial. Which material, would you today spend money on an onyx wall just because it's onyx, or would you use an alternate material for that instead? So what's the take on that aspect of honesty of materials?
See, Vista, onyx is also a natural material. So is Italian marble.
It is.
It may not be contextual, but yes, it's a natural material. When we import it, of course, we look into the embodied energy and so many other aspects, whether it's really useful, or something that we can, do without. It's very easy to import. It's very easy to spend a lot of money, but if you can do the same thing, because eventually you are looking at the overall life cycle, the maintainability, very important in a public space. So all those factors come into account. I am not per se against the use of Italian marble or imported materials, because there are certain materials which we still don't get here, but we use it judiciously, where you are exploring the strength of the material, graphene, for example, or cotton steel, uh, or zinc these days that we are using in sometimes in cladding, but we use it minimally and to replace something or to convey something which we are not able to with a local material. So that's where authenticity comes about. And if we are using it, we show it and don't hide it.
Abhigyan, what's your take on the same thing? I mean, I could presume what your answer will be, but natural versus looking natural.
My answer is we have to educate our client and we have to educate the end user. So now, for example, we're building this Inox cinemas, and when you enter into a cinema, either I can put a tile or an Italian marble. The question is, firstly, we took a call that we will not do imitation marble tile. So clear. Now, where to do Italian marble and whether to do tile is again the next debate. So the question is, if someone wants to elevate their lifestyle, they would always look up to a cinema hall with Italian marble because that is what he's been perceiving as luxury as versus the kind of a cement finished tile. So wherever wherever the right formula adapts, so where you need a certain sense of luxury, then that is where you should use Italian marble. Why? Because people have been perceiving Italian marble as a sense of luxury. I don't do it, but a larger user group or larger set of people then have to be educated that no, Indian is cool, which is not yet happened, which is not, we're still not in that process.
It's happening. Go vocal for local. It's happening.
Yes, but it's still not in the process that everyone would appreciate a Kadapa stone versus a 220 rupees Botticini stone. I mean, the biggest debate is that they still feel that Italian lagaya to kuch महंगा ही होगा या कुछ बढ़िया ही होगा. So the perception in general about materials is also a component of education of the end user. And when a builder builds a home, he will say that हमने भाई Italian लगा दिया. अब वो Italian क्या है? Egyptian है या Italian है या जैसा मर्जी है, कैसा material, it doesn't matter. So that is where we come into play and we say that no, this is cool, and we have to project brilliant projects in public space where people understand that yes, we could have done a brilliant story with an Indian stone also. So we've reverted to all our projects having Indian marbles, and we've stopped using Italian marbles and mix of Indian stones and polish them with diamond polish. You will not even know whether it's Indian marble or Italian marble. It's just a matter of conversation that yes, we say that yes, this is an expensive material and this is a cheaper material. So that education also has to happen. A difference between tile and marble, people have to understand that tile is also beautiful if it's used in its way of a tile. You can't make a marble looking tile and do a joint free kind of a look to make sure that it looks like an Italian marble. So we have to educate our clients that no, this is being fake. Let's not do it. Rather use a piece of tile which looks like a tile and do a grout and then make it express it like a tile. And that is very important. So that's my take on things. That's how our experience has been. Mute. Vistap, you're on mute.
Okay, so we've done with the philosophical side of the debate, and we're now down to the reality of things. How difficult was the lockdown period and the post-COVID scene when maybe you're not getting access to materials and stuff? Has it become a little more difficult putting mood boards together? First of all, how many of us actually put mood boards together? Maybe 5 mood boards for a project, honestly, because I normally land up seeing one project having one mood board. But would you do different areas, say a coffee shop, a reception, a banquet area, a room, having different mood boards if you were doing a hotel? What's the reality of this in your studios?
Yeah, a separate mood board for every space, of course. The public areas, the semi-public areas, the private areas. The same goes for a residence also. Very important, because every space is used in a different way. Every space behaves differently in different times of the day. It behaves differently in every season also. So we are very careful about that. That's why there are separate mood boards made for the lounge or the family lounge or the lobby areas, separate for the formal living areas, and a very different mood board for the inner living areas or the bedrooms. I think that's the way we work. So there are at least 6 to 7 mood board palettes,
And how
material.
difficult was it, putting mood boards during the lockdown or the post-lockdown period? Did you feel a need for technology to step in?
So technologically, yes, we could still create the mood boards because we had the materials with us, but conveying it to the client, because they were not able to feel or touch it, it's very important, and restricted to the screen. It's not able to convey everything. So which is why, but fortunately within 2-3 months, things have come back to normal, and most of the clients were back in the studios, and they really wanted to see and experience the materials and then take a decision. But yes, it becomes a challenge. Sourcing also becomes difficult. Online, definitely something I would really look forward to in the Storybox. That would be where something is really available online and makes it easy for everyone to reach, be it clients, be it designers, be it the industry. I think that's an excellent thing that you're doing.
So I'll just do a 1 minute promo, because I'm being
Love to see
prompted by
that.
my team behind me to explain what the Storybox is all about. So
Sure.
just bear with me. I think on the screen you can get to see, an entire range of mood boards at their very simplest form. That's the kind of box the materials would come in. You have 21 categories of materials that can go in, and when you click on any of them, you can actually get to see a wonderful range of materials that come up, and that allow you to make choices. What we've also done is try to use Pareto's principle. So those of you who are not aware, 80% of business is done by 20% of stock. So we've tried to identify, be selective in trying to also reduce the load on juniors who are there in offices, who quite frankly are putting materials together and then presenting it to the architects around. So it's a fantastic format that allows you to not just select what you want. 10 pieces of these come in the right size to you in a box, and it comes on your table within 48 to 72 hours. So that was my 1 minute of sponsored talk on an initiative that's very important. I want to ask others who can speak, is if Hemant is there. Would be great to sort of understand from you. Hemant, do you have challenges in putting materials together? In especially in a post-lockdown scenario where people are interacting lesser, do you feel technology would be the right way to use to go ahead? I think Hemant, are you around?
Technology has let him down, I guess.
Right. Okay. So, Swansel, would you like to take that in terms of what's the scenario post lockdown?
So, I mean, I have to say that as a studio, we've always maintained a very meticulous material library. And typically, it's of materials that we tend to use and reuse again because we align with them. And, there's particular veneers that are particular, let's say, there's cork flooring we've been using interestingly of late. There's certain stones, which of course we kind of tend to use again and again. So I think for us, it wasn't such a challenge at all. And we also as a practice tend to do very, instead of traditional mood boards, we do actually almost photorealistic rendered elevations for most of our interior projects. So that tends to, and that's supported later by materials, but it basically kind of is like absolutely like what the space is going to look like. It actually gives people a very, very clear visual of what the space is going to look like. So that really, so we rely a lot on high quality drawings to communicate space. And of course, the materiality is built into those renders. So we've already decided on exactly what shade of slate. And typically we Photoshop those materials into the renders as well. So it's kind of AutoCAD, Photoshop combined. But so when it comes to material selection, it's only at the point in time when you actually just before you get into the physical implementation at site that clients do want to see physical materials. And we fortunately had most of them with us. And I find that post-lockdown, meeting vendors and kind of getting them to send materials to site is very easy. So we've never faced a problem at all of any kind. And so I now really see things actually back to full swing actually now. So that's very heartening that suddenly the industry seems to be going quite ballistic, which is nice.
We're also having the surge going back to the original swing presently as we talk. So we are,
you never know.
You never know really about this. So,
but
I would say,
my challenge is
go ahead.
that the technology allows us only to see and hear. It doesn't allow us to touch and taste and smell.
Yeah.
The other three senses, for that, we have to meet physically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when we are talking about materials.
My personal story is that we did a lot of work in Zoom, but nothing converted into value or money. So you would want to meet the architect before you pay that person money. So similarly, you would want to touch the material before you buy it. You can't see it online and say, okay, fine, do dabbi bhej dena. So that doesn't work like that. Until unless it's in your hand and you touch it and feel it, that is where the transaction completes. So same for design. You can talk a lot on a Zoom and you can present hundreds of ideas, but till the time they don't see you face to face and you just shake hands, and that is where kind of transaction happens. So no matter how good technology bridges things together, but it's important for people to like shake hands.
It's virtual. It's still virtual.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So, just want to ask you a question that's come up. That what does the panel think of the, materials of the future? Which are going to be the materials of the future? How would you define the attributes of the materials of the future?
I mean, so
anyone, go ahead.
It's like a 10-year span where a lot of things start, and then the next 10 years things change. It's like fashion also, like you get terrazzo floor back. So then it was in 1980s and 90s, and now it's 2021. In the past 5 years, terrazzo is back in vogue. So there's nothing future or past. You will see constant, there's an upcycling and there things happen. There's a wave and everyone catches on to the wave. Some people don't adhere to the wave and they create their own kind of palette and they stick to it. But a lot of people then follow the wave and the wave finishes in 5 years or 6 years.
So let me ask you, for example, if there were attributes like durability or carbon neutrality or carbon negativity, or there were attributes like cost or attributes like biodegradable, what are the attributes of the materials of the future? Do you see any of this being relevant, or do you think anything works, Nilanjan?
Yeah, see, materials of the future have to be firstly lightweight. They have to be durable and economical. I'm talking about building materials and not purely from an interior standpoint, architecturally or for design. That's why there's a huge amount of research going on in the industry, and there are huge material which is being explored and even coming out. They're still slightly expensive. For example, graphene. Graphene is basically a thin sheet of carbon, can be made very tactile, can be bent, and has immense strength. Because we have to realize that our natural resources are also finite. How long can we rely on all our natural resources? So artificial materials will come up. There is, for example, transparent aluminium, as strong as aluminium, but transparent. Porcelain, for example, ceramic, when fired to a certain temperature and very fine, becomes transparent. So porcelain is another material. Metallic glass, it's like an amorphous metal, which has the quality and the strength of steel, but steel otherwise is crystalline, but glass is homogeneous. So that's how I think the materials will come up in the market in the future years. These are the, I think, materials of the future, which we will largely explore. And of course, right now they're still a little expensive because they are at the research stages, and some of them have come out, but the use is minimal and they are industrially produced in smaller quantities. But once they are used throughout everywhere, they will gradually, we will have to accept that at some places we will have to reduce our reliance on purely natural materials, because our
So
natural resources
let me prompt you, Nilanjan. Maybe a material like WPC, which you will now find replacing chocolates, wood. You will find it replacing wooden deck floors. You will find, so many aspects of WPC, which is so relevant for wet areas where it rains a lot. So, is that the kind of material which is a replacement of the natural material? Is that the way forward? Because the resources are finite on Earth.
Yeah, I think we will have to gradually shift to that to a large extent, especially for large scale projects, because it's much faster also. It's much easier to produce and mass produce and transport, because it becomes lightweight. It's very important as compared to a natural material, and it's durable and it's more economical in the longer run.
But it's
So,
not the real material, Swanzel.
yeah,
It's not. It's
so
not
I
the real
haven't
thing.
spoken yet. I haven't spoken yet.
being
Let him
uh,
finish.
uh, yes. So there is always that conflict within us, how much uh, to use. And that's why I specified that for very large scale projects, we will have to justify our demands and over reliance on natural resources. Yeah, for certain things, yes, we will still be using the natural materials, which are still easily available, but not for a lot of, like you're saying, WPC to a large extent is becoming HPL, for example. We are not really so fond of cladding as such. We love the natural, even exposed brickwork still looks very good, or exposed RCC or anything which is natural. But I've seen, I mean, to what extent can you rely on, the availability of natural resources?
Absolutely. So, Swanzel, over to you and your lobby of natural materials.
No, so I agree with, I think we're all in the same lobby actually, Vistas. I don't think we're disagreeing in any way. I think that you really, where I see materials moving is into a healing and restorative space. So I really think that and I think organic materials do this very well, but it doesn't stop there. So I really see that in the future, and I'm hoping to see this, that, you have materials which are nimble and frugal in terms of their carbon footprint, but which are highly intelligent in terms of what they deliver. So I would really like to see materials, for example, there are now materials which are well known in other parts of the world, which actually gather water from the air, right? In Israel, there's experimentation going on. So how does a material actually generate a resource? Is that possible? So you're actually flipping the whole story from a material that becomes extraction to a material that becomes generation. So whether you look at it as, transparent photovoltaics for facades, which are actually generating energy for a building, which is also now a reality, right? Or you look at the work that this architect called Neri Oxman, who's a biologist turned architect, is actually doing with, as part of the mediated matter lab, where she's working with robotics and organisms. So she's actually working, and she looks at biological time, where you're actually looking at how organisms like silkworms can work on robotic structures and actually weave facades. Of course, this is not habitable, but it's the beginnings of experimentation. So I'm very excited by that intersect, when you actually cross the boundaries of what has been done and what has been. And I find it quite, if you actually think back and reflect on the idea of form and how materials and expression and the form that they take, it's really surprisingly unchanged. I mean, you look at Indus Valley civilization, Mohenjo-daro, and you look at what we're creating now, and the whole idea of this linearity, apart from a few exceptions uh, that are now really working with, kind of biomimicry and parametrics, and the whole idea of breaking away from what I would call the kind of almost the prison of the line in a way, So the idea of how once that starts to happen, how automatically different material choices will need to be made, because traditional materials cannot support that geometry, you know. So I think that that is all going to be very exciting, because that is the way I see things moving, because of the possibilities of technology and the possibilities of implementation. So you see those patterns, and I see that that will have an impact on what materials will emerge to fill that need, you know. So it's exciting. I think it's going to be exciting whichever way, whether these are bioengineered materials, whether they are technically engineered materials. But I think that that is where we will need to move as a planet if we are going to in some way try and offset where we have actually arrived, thanks to the collective
Right, great.
consumption.
Swanzil, you've given us the topic for our next discussion, so I think that's awesome. And I think you get a gift hamper from us, which will be delivered to you. And and I just have 2 minutes left. So there's a question which I just need 1 or 2 line answers from all three of you, surviving panelists. How can we leverage digital technology to ease the logistical challenges of getting the right material at the right cost within time? Is that too long a question? How can we leverage digital technology to ease the logistical challenges of getting the right material at the right cost within time?
So what if WPC was available on Amazon, and then you could have checked with 5 companies, and you can order a board in 5 minutes, and it gives a delivery time of next day. So probably, and these kind of formats are going to come in where you order material, hardware, everything online, and just comes to the vendor directly. So that is on its way. It's yet not very prevalent, because you would want to go to a local vendor to buy a material, but very soon everything is going to go. So you can order multiple things from multiple places on an online marketplace, and see what's the cost and how much time will it take to reach you.
Sure. And
Yeah,
any of
I
you,
think it's the
Nilanjan,
future.
Swanzil?
I think it's the future. Already, if you look at how the COVID situation has got all of us to migrate to online purchasing of everything, you know, and what I think all of us have realized is that it becomes a remarkable opportunity to actually be cost effective and to set up, you know, comparatives across different vendors in terms of procurement of materials, because earlier one relied more on established, you know, you weren't thinking so much out of the box. I think now what this situation has actually given us all is an opportunity to really reinvent everything, you know, to look at how we practice, how we function. I mean, who would have thought that virtual studios are working, you know, brilliantly? People are working from home. Corporates across the world are not coming back to working full time ever again. You know, these are radical shifts that we've seen in this year, and these shifts are there to stay. You know, I think because everybody has now realized that there are many different ways of functioning, and I think material access is going to be definitely the future, because at least in terms of exploring what is possible and what is available, I think the real challenge is going to be that always it's the how that material is rendered within the online space is what becomes the challenge. So I think that uh, improving the quality of, you know, the documentation of the material, like typically if you, the way that we find it so challenging to work with, for example, stone, if you're looking at just as one example, or even veneers. Fortunately, with veneers, when you have catalogs, you have actual sheets of veneers. So you're looking at the veneer, you can put the water on it and see what it's going to look like when it gets polished. But a lot of the online catalogs and online sites that are available for material are seriously challenged by the quality of their imagery. And I think that is where the idea of virtual technology and the idea of better photographic documentation in natural light, and so that there is a sense of, and I don't know where the next step would be, I guess, in some way to really enable a physical experience of that material. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I'm sure at some point in the near future that will also be enabled through touch screens and through touch pads. So you know, it's all going to happen. You know, I think that this is the beginning of a lot of change, you know, and it's a good thing, because it does. I mean, again, if I look at it from the sustainability lobby, you're saving so much in traveling. You know, you can make choices without having to physically go to a place, you know. And while and the benefit is that in any case, if you're largely using local materials, you don't have to travel very far. So I mean, they're always going to be accessible. So I think a lot, we're going to really see some very interesting shifts in in how spaces are rendered in this context and in the years to
Great.
come.
So wonderful, Swanzil. Nilanjan, just got a minute left. Any parting lines to say as
Nothing.
the person who's working in all segments of the industry?
It's getting the material at the right place, from the right place, at the right cost, at the right time is not a challenge. The challenge is what you do with it. That's all I want to say, and how you use that material.
Lovely, lovely. Just a quick last word from me, because I love to have the last laugh. I was talking to a client the other day and I said, no material, koi material badnaam nahi hai. Sare material achhe hain. It is the way you use the material. So I think that's the parting shot from my side. Thanks all of you, for being part of this. This is the first of a few sessions, and technical glitches barring, we've had a great session. Thanks a lot, each one of you, for being on the first panel. Lovely to have you.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us over, Vista. It was great
Thank you.
and nice catching up.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Likewise,
Thank you.
take
Bye.
care.